The light in the sky, which we call Jupiter, largest of the 7 wandering stars, is universally identified with the supreme thunder god of ancient mythology. The Roman Jupiter, or Jove, is one and the same with the Greek Zeus, the Norse Thor, the Celtic Arthur, the Germanic Donner, the Hindu Indra, and so on. The word Thursday is named for this same thunder god. Thor's Day for Thor, in the case of English, but this planetary link can be observed in nearly all Indo-European languages. In the system of astrological correspondences upon which all Western Hermeticism, alchemy, and even science is founded, the planet Jupiter rules over thunderstorms, oak trees, and the metal tin. In addition to these natural components, this planet is believed to bestow the qualities of benevolence, purity, youth, grace, wealth, wisdom, foresight, and corresponds to the third eye chakra. Even J.K. Rowling's fictional Harry Potter borrows from this same archetype, bearing his runic lightning scar atop his brow. This correlation is mirrored in the Bindi of South Asia, invoking the planet Jupiter with its cyclopean red storm. Among all the forces of nature, it is the thunderbolt which best represents that spark of consciousness emanating from the third eye. This same flash can be imagined as the light from which our imagination is projected inside the brain. The anatomical title for this energy center would be the pineal gland, the organ responsible for dreaming, and we once again find an association with visions and flashes of light. Speaking of dreams and thunderstorms, let us now turn our attention to the sunny state of Florida. On average, this state will see 3,500 cloud-to-ground lightning flashes per day, contributing to an overall 1.2 million flashes per year. According to the National Weather Service, quote, the corridor from Tampa Bay, Florida to Titusville, Florida, aka Lightning Alley, receives the most lightning in the United States on an annual basis. While certain statistics can be used to crown Venezuela as the world lightning champion, geoscientist and professor at University of South Florida, Matthew Pasek, declared in April 2023 that, quote, Florida is the lightning capital of the world, end quote. Unfortunately, this frequency of strikes is mirrored in the number of lightning-related deaths, with this peninsula boasting more than double the fatalities of the next deadliest state. What many experts fail to note, however, is the peculiarities, both geological and metaphysical, that trace this mysterious lightning alley. Traveling along this electric avenue, we will discuss the otherworldly crystals produced by its lightning, anomalous clamshells containing not pearl, but stunning gemstones, minerals not found anywhere else on this earth, and much, much more. Now enjoy.
Welcome to Florida, baby.
Introducing Dr. Narco Longo.
Many legends are told regarding the spot where rainbows touch the ground. But how many people can say they know what happens when lightning touches the ground? Well, when lightning strikes the earth, under proper conditions, the most bewildering of artifacts are left behind. Believe it or not, Florida is world famous for its fossilized lightning, known as Fulgurites. The following comes to us from Encyclopedia Britannica. Quote, Fulgurite, a glossy silica mineral fused in the heat from a lightning strike. Fulgurite is a common mineral with two varieties. Sand fulgurites, the more common, are branching, more or less cylindrical tubes that are about 1/2 inch to several centimeters in diameter. They are commonly less than 10 feet long, but sometimes reach 66 feet. The central cavity is usually lined with glass, and the exterior shows adhering sand grains. The shores of Lake Michigan and the Atlantic coast are typical sites. End quote. The word Fulgurite comes to us from the Roman god Vulcan. Vulcan is the god of the forge and fire, particularly in its destructive aspects as volcanoes and lightning strikes. Words like volcano, voltage, vulgar, Volga, fulcrum, falcon, and so on are derived from this god. He is one and the same with the Greek Hephaestus. Though we have already asserted Jupiter to be the god of lightning, we can distinguish him from Vulcan by visualizing Jupiter as the hammer in the heavens, which, upon striking the earthly anvil below, grants Vulcan his association with sparks. This connection is driven home by the fact that volcanoes can actually trigger their own lightning storms upon erupting. Quote, his worship was very ancient, and at Rome he had his own priest, Flamen, or Flame Man. His chief festival, the Vulcanalia, was held on August 23rd and was marked by a rite of unknown significance. The heads of Roman families threw small fish into the fire. Vulcan was invoked to avert fires, as his epithets, Quietus and Mulciber, fire alair, suggest. Because he was a deity of destructive fire, his temples were properly located outside the city. In Roman myth, Vulcan was the founder of Cassilus, founder of Palestrina, Italy. Vulcan was also the father of the monster Cassis, who was killed by Hercules for stealing his cattle. End quote. While Florida is not the only place where Fulgurites occur, there are various factors that set the Fulgurites of Florida apart from the rest. The first being their extreme concentration. There are places along Florida's Lightning Alley where one can find dozens upon dozens of Fulgurites without walking more than 50 feet in any direction.
We're going to find a Fulgurite. So here on the Lake Wales Ridge, we're in the lightning capital of the United States. We get more bolts of lightning coming down here than anywhere else in the country. So this is a perfect spot to look for Fulgurites. If we get lucky, we might find the exact spot where the bolt hit the sand.
What are they made of? Well, they're made of quartz sand, not much else. And there's a variety of glass called Le Chatellierite, and that is quartz glass. So, SiO2. There's some really big strikes that happen, and I see that some of you found some very fat fulgurites. Those are not very common, but they will happen. And the amount of energy in them, we can actually calculate 2 times the diameter, the energy in megajoules of those fulgurites.
Florida's geography is so interesting. You'd think we'd be at the beach with all this sand, but we're in the middle of Florida, and this sand here is millions of years old. This is the Florida stuff in white. But notice this, have you ever seen orange colored sand? Well, this has actually come all the way over from Africa on the trade winds. A few million years ago, this entire area was covered by water, and in fact, these are ancient sand dunes. Just on the other side of that sand is where the waves would be breaking. So how do we know that over millions of years this place was covered by water? Well, one clue, so look at this. Here we have shells in the middle of the state. They weren't just dropped here by a tourist. Even more shells!
The connection between the iron-rich sand and the frequency of lightning strikes has not been academically entertained whatsoever. We do know for certain, however, that Iron Mountain, Florida, sharing in the iron sand of this region, was once worshipped on impulse by native Floridians. This type of hypnomagnetic effect is mirrored in the traditions of many belief systems. Today the hill hosts the Bok Tower and Gardens, which I discuss at length in many of my videos. Just down the road from this hill, and still well within the lightning capital, is a spot where the locals claim cars are able to roll themselves uphill. The iron contained in this million-year-old sand from Africa just might contribute to the electromagnetic phenomena of the surrounding areas. Before we move on from Fulgurites, let us discuss one very recent discovery involving a lightning strike in Newport Richey, Florida, that left behind an extraterrestrial material. The following comes to us from livescience.com, but the same story was reported on by dozens of publications, and I quote, "Never before seen crystal-like matter hidden in a chunk of fossilized lightning is probably a brand new mineral. The potential new mineral was discovered in a chunk of fossilized lightning, or fulgurite, that was left behind when a tree in Florida was struck by lightning. A potentially brand new mineral may have been hiding inside a chunk of fossilized lightning from Florida, scientists have revealed. Quote, "We have never seen this material occur naturally on Earth," Matthew Pasek, a geoscientist of the University of South Florida, said in a statement. Quote, "Minerals similar to it can be found in meteorites and space, but we've never seen this exact material anywhere." The fossilized lightning chunk, or fulgurite, was created when lightning struck a tree near Newport Richey. Fulgurites form when powerful lightning bolts discharge through the ground, which melts and fuses any nearby soil, sand, rock, and organic debris into a singular, metallic-looking lump. The owner of the Newport Richey tree sold the fulgurite to Pasek, who studies high-energy chemical reactions like those triggered by lightning. After cracking open the rocky lump, which was around 2.8 inches long and 0.8 inches wide, Pasek and fellow researchers discovered a, quote, "colorful crystal-like matter." Within the new material is a brand new mineral type, but it will take time for this to be confirmed by other scientists. The researchers published their findings March 14th in the journal Communications, Earth, and Environment. During their analysis, the researchers also tried and failed to recreate the mineral in a lab. The scientists believe they failed to recreate the new material because it rapidly forms under precise conditions that are hard to predict and replicate. Every time they got close, the compound would start to break down into something else because it had been heated for too long. The researchers hope that this form of calcium phosphate can soon be confirmed as a new mineral, at which point it will be officially named. They also believe that other brand new mineral types could be created through a similar pathway and want to examine more fulgurites to test this theory. This is not the first time that an unexpected compound has been discovered in fossilized lightning. In December 2022, researchers found a rare type of quasi-crystal in a fulgurite unearthed in Nebraska's sandhills. Quasi-crystals are unusual, rule-breaking crystals with patterns that do not repeat. End quote. The goddess Venus, depicted here, standing in a seashell, is said to be the daughter of Jupiter and the wife of Vulcan. This Roman goddess of beauty and love is one and the same with the Greek Aphrodite, the Norse Freya, the Egyptian Isis, etc. Believe it or not, the state of Florida actually has 3 cities by the names of Jupiter, Juno, and Venus. Unsurprisingly, Florida is also famous for its multitude of seashells. Sanibel Island, situated not very far from Venus, Florida, has long reigned as the undisputed seashell capital of the world. While Florida's seashells are beautiful in their own right, we find here a type of crystal shell not found anywhere else. Fort Drum, Florida, is said to be the only place on Earth where clamshell calcite can be found. Let us now read from AppalachianMinerals.com. Quote, first discovered by Dr. Thomas Scott of the Florida Geological Survey, the clams were found in living position and were largely confined to a stratigraphic zone 0.3 to 0.6 meters thick throughout the pit. Because these clams were found in hinge-up living position, it was suggested that they died in place due to a catastrophic event, such as sudden burial or freshwater poisoning, resulting from a hurricane, tsunami, or other cause. The age of these fossils is late Pliocene to early Pleistocene, that is 1 to 1.5 million years old. The size of the crystals and the occurrence of many complete, articulated, crystal-filled clams make this occurrence unique. In all crystal-bearing specimens, portions of the sides and sometimes tops of the clamshells have been dissolved by groundwater. This creates natural windows into each clam, allowing the internal crystallization to be more easily seen. The largest crystal clusters grow downward from the hinge area, top, of the clams. When found broken away from the rest of the fossil clam, these hinge pieces make outstanding thumbnail to small cabinet-sized crystal specimens. Now pay attention here. The calcite from this site fluoresces a light yellow-green color under shortwave, midwave, and longwave UV light, and also phosphoresces for a second or two once the black light is extinguished. This site produced other calcified pelecypods, including whelk, arc shells, and many others. Ruck's Pit was an active mine, worked primarily for lime rock, used for road-based material. The stratigraphic zone, mined for aggregate, was the same horizon from which the calcified shell occurred. Unfortunately, mining ceased in 2007, and the pit was allowed to completely flood. In Florida, excavations and rock pits which uncover calcites and other interesting collector materials are often only open for a short period of time before being reclaimed, flooded, or built over. Much productive specimen recovery has been a matter of being in the right place at the right time. End quote. The possible influence of lightning and magnetism on the development of these shells has not been entertained by mainstream academia.
What happened? The clam died in a tsunami, and was covered with superficial sand and sediment from the ocean. The sediment, as that clam died, it was closed. If a clam dies naturally in the sea, it opens. By this clam having the top and bottom and being closed, it died alive. It was covered with sand. The sediment seeped in. This cementation level right here shows that the mud was on this level. From the mud line up to the top of this shell was covered with water. When the supersaturation from the mangrove forests that was above this, once that the sulfuric acid permitted through the material, it created a supersaturation of calcium carbonate, like a milkshake, and it was floating on top of the cement line.
Venturing just outside of Florida's waters, but well within the bounds of tropical Atlantis, we will now read from earthology.com. Quote, "The popular 20th century prophet, Edgar Cayce, 1877 to 1945, told his followers about his visions of the great crystals that powered Atlantis, and he referred to the healing capacities of crystals. Cayce taught that crystals possessed an energy within themselves that could be transmitted to people and be of great assistance in meditation, healing, and the achievement of higher levels of consciousness. For Cayce, Atlantis was more than myth. It was the history of the first human civilization, capable of advanced technology, capable of harnessing the power of quartz technology and the electromagnetic field. According to legend, the Atlanteans used crystals quite extensively and misused them to such a degree that they eventually led to the catastrophe which caused Atlantis to disappear into the ocean. The crystal was tuned too high, activating volcanoes and melting mountains, ultimately causing the submergence of Atlantis, and perhaps even the axis shift of the Earth itself. Cayce claimed a new island would rise up near the island of Bimini, and that it would be the top of Atlantis, and only a small portion of it. Cayce also foretold that a gemstone of incredible beauty with powerful healing properties would be discovered in the Caribbean Sea, which he referred to as the Blue Stone. It's claimed that the stone originated on Atlantis and may have actually been the crystal that Cayce claimed was the mechanism of the Atlanteans' destruction. Given that Larimar's color comes from the volcanic eruptions unique to the Dominican Republic, Larimar is quite possibly the Blue Stone. Cayce died in 1945, but in September of 1968, the Bimini Road was found in the Bermuda Triangle, just off the coast of Florida. Could this be part of the lost city of Atlantis? And are the unusual occurrences there caused by the energy of the crystals that formerly powered the city? Are we left with an island that sunk thousands of years ago, with hidden power sources that still zap unwary travelers today? Anything's possible." End quote.
There have been few modern-day discoveries which can truthfully claim to be original. The majority of new innovations seem to be the rediscovery of ancient knowledge, which has in some way been lost by the passage of time.
This is certainly true of crystal therapy, which utilizes and harnesses electromagnetic energy for healing.
Crystals actually have their own energy, and they have quartz crystal has the ability to amplify, transform, store information. So with this knowledge, we're able to combine the crystal energy with our own energy to actually amplify our own healing energy, or the universal healing energy that's coming through our hands when we work. So when the crystal combines with our energy, it brings light in and amplifies our own natural healing repair system that's already going on in the body.
First used on the legendary continent of Atlantis, crystals became indispensable to the people of that time, who capitalized on their capacity to store and amplify any power source fed into them. In a manner still mostly unknown to modern-day scientists, large crystals provided lighting, power, and transport. Today, scientists are slowly rediscovering the power of crystals and are beginning to regain some of that lost knowledge obscured over the millennia. Crystal therapy is the therapeutic use of semi-precious and precious crystals for healing. Each crystal is believed to have specific therapeutic properties, although the same crystal may have varied effects on different people. The most common crystals used in general healing are quartz and amethyst crystals. Both these crystals are believed to be very efficient in magnifying healing energies from either a mechanical source or from a human being. Crystal therapy is commonly used in conjunction with color therapy, using a crystal light box. This is a box which produces different colors using gels. Different crystals are placed inside the box to focus light energy and project it onto the body. In some parts of the world, electrocrystal therapy is also practiced. This involves the transmission of different pulses of high-frequency electromagnetic energy through specific crystals.
They amplify energy, they transfer it, they focus it, they store it. They're very, very powerful tools.
Different crystals do have different properties, but we use them as a tool in healing. We actually don't say this crystal heals me. It's like quartz is used as a tool for amplifying sound in radio signals or computers, lasers, all that sort of thing. So they're amplifying the energy of the crystal. But in order to use them as a tool for healing, we can get in touch with the properties that some of the crystals have. So for instance, the rose quartz has a very loving and gentle sort of energy, and so that can help to calm and soothe someone. Amethyst has also a calming energy and can be used to just break up or clear conflict in a room. And then the clear quartz is a great energizer. It can amplify our energy and help us to gain vitality and zest.
The actual time humans first discovered and began using crystals still remains somewhat obscured. Archaeologists such as Geoffrey Goodman, who wrote the book Psychic Archaeology, speculate that humans may have started collecting crystals for healing purposes more than 100,000 years ago in North America. The first recorded use of crystals dates back many thousands of years ago, during the time of Atlantis, where crystals were believed to have generated light, provided transport, and used as an adjunct in healing. The Atlanteans would use the crystal's natural electromagnetic energy to effect changes in the mental, physical, and spiritual bodies of the people. Crystals and crystal power were the principal source of energy for these people. However, as with many tools of man, these powers and energies were subject to misuse, which caused the downfall of the Atlantean civilization. After the fall of Atlantis, many ancient cultures, such as the Tibetan and Egyptian civilizations, began rediscovering the power of crystals. Around 3000 BC, the Egyptian priesthood began recreating certain aspects of the Atlantean civilization and constructed the Great Pyramids, which contained a large crystal on its apex. The Great Pyramids were thought to have been created to harness in or tap into the universal energy which came from above. Soon after, the knowledge of crystal healing was passed down through the centuries among countless cultures. The Babylonian and Assyrians used crystals as amulets, while ancient Roman and Greek authors wrote books describing the characteristics of various crystals and stones. In modern times, with the growth of electronics in the 1950s and 60s, synthetic crystals sprouted new interests. These crystals could be grown to specific specifications for use in precision electronic equipment, such as watches or computers. In recent years, with the invention of the crystal wand by London practitioner Harry Oldfield, the ancient art of crystal healing has since been rediscovered. Oldfield's device consisted of a white sound frequency generator connected to a hollow glass tube filled with various crystals and saline solution. The white sound would then be translated into an electric current stimulating the crystals, which will be placed on various acupuncture or acupressure points on the body. Through his research, Oldfield found that numerous crystals contain specific properties affecting different physical, mental, and spiritual aspects of the body. Each crystal is believed to possess a unique property when applied to the body. Crystals can also be used in chakra healing and balancing, where individual crystals balance energies at each chakra point.
Well, particular crystals work very, very well in synchronicity with the energy of the chakra centers, certain ones. That's why I place certain ones on certain chakra centers. But again, I don't like to be too dogmatic about anything, because I really believe that none of us are experts in this field. None of us can claim to be experts in this field, because we're really all, it's as if we're all in kindergarten still. We're still just relearning about crystals. We knew it all before, back in the times of Lemuria and Atlantis. We blew it, and now we're learning again, taking it step by step gradually. But I don't feel that any of us can claim to be experts yet. Not by a long shot. We're still learning.
For hundreds of thousands of years, different cultures have utilized the power within crystals for healing. This ancient art is once again being brought forward into the world. Hopefully, with the lessons learnt from the demise of ancient cultures such as Atlantis, humankind will be able to use the power of crystals to benefit all aspects of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual life.
One of the most beautiful and useful of minerals is rock crystal or quartz. Quartz is brilliant and clear in its pure form, but it takes on colors and tints when it contains traces of impurities. Quartz grows in many forms and makes up a very large part of the crust of the earth. It is also known under other names such as amethyst, agate, and rose quartz. Once used principally for decoration, it is today more than a thing of beauty. When cut into tiny pieces, it controls the frequency of radio transmission and reception. Crystal wafers, precisely cut from the natural mineral, set the radio channels for the armed forces, much as push buttons select the stations on home sets. They do it more simply and with greater accuracy. In war, they provide quick and certain means of communication between fighting units. While experimenting with piezoelectric crystals during World War I and seeking a method of locating submarines, Professor Cayce recognized in quartz the key to the hair-splitting accuracy which crystal controls provide for radio today. Piezoelectricity, a property of quartz and of certain other crystals, was discovered by the Curie brothers of France more than a half a century ago. The problem of getting radio plates out of the rock can be understood by considering this wooden model. We desire a little square plate cut at just the right angles of tilt and of turn with reference to the natural boundaries of the perfect crystal. The crystallographer speaks of axes which are perpendicular and parallel to some of these faces. We have to saw through the quartz at angles which are exactly right to have the finished plate behave properly in the radio set. The plate whose boundaries are traced in pencil on this wooden model is known as a GT cut plate because of its particular orientation in the mother rock. Holding angles of cut to extremely close tolerances, is one of the cardinal principles of good crystal plate manufacture. Precise orientation seems simple when the quartz has its natural faces. Fortunately, even in rough faceless quartz, the layer structure of the atoms is still there as a guide. This structure can be picked up with X-rays. In the receiving room of the factory, the cases of rough quartz are opened and a preliminary sorting and inspection of each piece takes place. Practically all quartz used in the manufacture of radio crystals comes from Brazil. Its value to the nation is so great that each bears a label of its importance. The quartz is roughly sorted according to size, shape, presence or absence of natural faces, and quality. We do not find many ideally shaped quartz crystals in the shipments. Crystals that show more than a few of their original faces are uncommon. With most pieces, these faces have been broken off in mining. Others have been rounded and smoothed by rolling on the bottoms of streams. A few are fairly symmetrical, with faces clearly formed. Sometimes quartz has a reddish appearance on the surface, and occasionally it is a smoky color throughout. But color is of little importance in making radio plates. After preliminary sorting, there is a thorough inspection for cracks, optical twinning, inclusions, and other internal imperfections. This is done in an immersion tank filled with a special type of mineral oil. The inspector submerges each quartz crystal and rotates it in a strong beam of light. Under oil, the surfaces of the quartz vanish, letting the interior imperfections come to light for the inspector to observe. From the character of these imperfections, he judges the usefulness of each piece. After the quartz has been examined under oil in polarized light, it is marked according to its quality. The grades and sizes after being classified are placed in storage trays, and these, quickly identified by color or other means, are stacked ready for manufacturing. From the storage trays, the racks are carried to the orienting and sawing departments, where the manufacturing process begins. Pieces for the day's production are selected, and the method of cutting which will produce the greatest number of crystal oscillators is decided upon. The quartz is again submerged in oil so that the optic axis may be located and marked. The optic axis is found by locating certain bands of color which are formed when the quartz is examined in polarized light. Also, in polarized light, certain types of imperfections in quartz are revealed by other patterns in color. A striking example of this latter is seen in this flat plate. The triangular patterns, which keep their forms though the colors change with the change of the lighting, indicate twinning of the quartz. Twinning is an imperfection which must be discovered and twinned regions avoided in the finished plates. By means of such color effects, the operator has now decided where the optic axis lies and is marking a guideline on the surface. For ease in guiding the sawing operations to come, he paints a series of dots along the axis to make the direction stand out. The rough quartz is next cut by the saw into small pieces. The saw is a rotating disc of copper or steel, charged with diamond powder along the rim. As the revolving blade starts into the stone, a thin stream of cooling liquid is directed across it. Special saws are among the many developments which have been made during the war to facilitate the manufacture of quartz plates in large quantities. The quartz is harder than steel, but the diamond-edged blades quickly go through the large pieces. For successful cutting without undue waste of material, the saw blades must be as thin as possible and quite free from vibration. A stone of this size is cut into several slabs, and for convenience in handling, each of these slabs will in turn be sliced into smaller pieces. Precisely and quickly, the blade of the saw cuts through the quartz. Note here how its shadow appears to mark the way. Sawing so far seen has been of the rougher sort along the approximate axis of the mother quartz. The final slicing of this bar into wafers is an operation of more precision. And in order to keep record of the orientation of the bar in relation to the original mother quartz, a reference direction is marked on the surface. As a first step, we need to identify the electrically negative and positive faces of the quartz bar. This is done by squeezing it gently under a lever arm and measuring the electrical charge on a vacuum tube voltmeter. The second step in lining up the quartz for cutting is made in a conoscope. Direction marks are again made on the bar, and it is placed in an electric oven to be heated in preparation for mounting. The warmed quartz is taken from the oven, coated with shellac and hot cementing compound, and its piezoelectrically negative side mounted down against the faceplate of the jig. For accurate determination of the angle for cutting the wafers, it is necessary to provide for both easy adjustment and firm clamping of the quartz. It is mounted on a jig, such as the one shown, where the quartz may be oriented in any direction. It is to be finally locked in just the right position for the saw cut. The quartz, firmly bolted on the adjustable jig, is again submerged in the oil of the conoscope. The quartz is to be aligned in relation to the internal structure of the quartz rather than to the surfaces of the rough bar. With this flat bar, the optic axis shows itself as the center of a very perfect set of colored rings which appears in the eyepiece. These rings shift as the bar is turned ever so slightly. The task is to center the rings on the crosshairs of the eyepiece. When this is done, it determines the optic axis with good precision. For final and still greater accuracy, adjustments are made by means of X-rays in the darkroom. The X-ray machine is so set up that when the quartz is tilted to its exact position for sawing the BT cut crystals, a characteristic pattern of spots is reflected from the atoms of the crystal, making a sort of picture of the positions of the atoms. These spots are not visible to the camera, but appear on the screen before the operator. When satisfied that the position is correct, the operator locks the jig in proper adjustment and places it on the shelf ready for the wafering saw. In looking back, we have seen the mother crystal sawed into slabs, and one of these in turn into several bars. Wafers are next to be precisely cut from one of these bars on the basis of the electric, optic, and X-ray tests which we have just seen. On the bottom of the steel jig upon which the crystal is mounted is a groove that fits accurately into a runner on the saw table, ensuring that the quartz cut will be in accordance with the X-ray measurements. Vertical arrows have been drawn on the quartz in 2 previous operations so that the crystal would not get inverted. After the jig is firmly bolted to the saw head, a preliminary cut is made to remove the end of the bar, and again an identifying arrow is drawn to keep track of the up direction of the first wafer to be cut. The rough wafers are rarely more than 1/16 of an inch thick, and it is quite an art to saw them thin and true from this hard and brittle material. The final finishing of the crystal plates to thickness will be done in grinding and lapping machines, and the time for this operation will be greatly shortened and much material will be saved if the wafers are initially cut thin and accurately by the saw. Quartz crystal manufacturing makes important use of X-ray machines as part of mass production. X-rays permit measurements of angle in the crystal to be made much more accurately than is possible by other instruments. This X-ray machine is equipped with an electric meter to pick up the reflections from the atoms. Although the orientation of the bar before cutting was made with great care, the tolerances of the radio plate are so small that it is desirable to check the angle again after the first wafer is sawed, to make certain that if there is a slight error, it will not be repeated in other wafers sawed from the same bar. After the first wafering cut has proved to be accurate, the entire quartz bar will be cut up into wafers. In order to find any defects or twinning which may have escaped previous tests, the wafers are now etched in a safety etch bath Motor-driven arms agitate the solution during etching. After an hour or so in the etching bath, they are washed and then cleaned with alcohol. The etched wafer has a white surface. The difference between an etched and an unetched wafer is readily seen. In looking for twinning on etched surfaces, the inspector sits before a small turntable and rotates the wafers under a concentrated spotlight. Differences in sheen of the surface bring to light any twinned regions. Here are several examples of twinning as seen on etched wafers. The twinned portion is marked out with a pencil. When the wafer is being cut into quartz plates of the required size, the twinned portions will be avoided. The wafers are again examined, this time in the polariscope. in order that when square plates are cut, their edges may be lined up with the electric axis of the quartz. A line indicating this direction is drawn upon them. In marking out the wafers, they are squared up with this line. The workers space their lines carefully so as to get as many plates as possible from the wafer. The two sides of the squares, which have been outlined in pencil, are now cut one at a time by rotary dicing saws. The wafer rests flat on the table as it moves under the whirling saw. The table moves toward the blade, and the wafer is neatly and quickly cut through. Wafers marked for several blanks are here held in the hand for the separation cut. For speed in cutting and to reduce breakage, the partly cut wafers are next stacked and held together with paraffin. The uneven sides of the bundle are cut in the mechanical dicing saws. After one side has been cut, the bundle is turned and the operation is repeated. After the bundle has been cut, the paraffin is melted and removed from the square blanks. They are sorted according to thickness and are ready for the first stage of grinding and lapping. In the first lapping machines, coarse blanks are ground down to a thickness of approximately 17 thousandths of an inch. The lapping machines are flat cast iron discs grooved on the surface. On the bottom disc is placed a thin zinc holder with pentagonal openings. When this holder is secured in position, the rough blanks are inserted in the openings. The top grinding disc, which is also grooved, is now placed carefully on the blanks. In the high-speed lapping machines, the bottom plates of which revolve swiftly, the blanks are lapped in approximately 1/10 of the time formerly required. Lapping is done with a comparatively coarse silicon carbide abrasive. When the desired time of grinding is completed, the machines automatically stop and the blanks are removed. They are cleaned and prepared for grinding of the edges. In grinding edges to uniform size, The blanks are again stacked in bundles and cemented together with paraffin. The four edges of the stack are ground until they are smooth and even and have the desired dimensions. The blanks are uncemented by soaking in boiling water. Then they are cleaned and ready for classification. A dial-type micrometer speeds up this classification. They are measured and grouped by thousandths of an inch. A given number of blanks of the same thickness are taken for the final delicate machine grinding. From the classification room, the sorted blanks are sent to the dust-proof precision lapping room, where they will be mechanically ground fairly close to the desired frequency. The first operation in precision lapping is the thorough washing of the machine and the holders to remove all old abrasive. The eccentric motion of the holders ensures uniform grinding of all blanks. After washing, the holders are turned before another lapping begins. The selected blanks of the same thickness are distributed in the holders. Spoonfuls of fine abrasive are next poured onto the blanks. After spreading the abrasive carefully over the blanks, the operator gently feels to be sure that all of the blanks are in place. The top lap, which is grooved like the bottom one, is now placed on the machine. The clock is started and set for the required time that the machine is to operate. When the time of lapping has ended, the operator deftly lifts off the top lapping plate and removes one sample blank from each of the 5 holders. These are cleaned and tested between metal electrodes in an oscillating circuit. Upon adjustment of the dial, the meter tells the activity of the blank, and at the same time, an audible tone indicates the frequency by comparison with the standard. If the blanks tested are close to the desired frequency, all of the remaining blanks are removed from the machine and sent to a second classification department, where they will be tested individually. In this second classification department, each blank is tested electrically and sorted according to frequency in preparation for the final finishing to specification. The thickness of the crystal plates determines the frequency. The thinner the plate, the higher the frequency. In the final finishing department, the crystals are etched, first in mass and then individually by hand, to bring them up to the various specified frequencies. Preparatory to the mass etching operation, the crystals are then stacked in notched Pyrex glass racks and are given a final cleansing in a concentrated chromic acid solution. The crystals are first thoroughly cleaned to remove abrasive and oil left by the machine lapping process. The racked crystals are transferred into successive shallow tanks in which the acid is washed off. The crystals are now etched in a solvent for quartz known as frequency etch for a sufficient time to bring their frequency close but not quite to the final frequency desired. The crystals are then removed from the etching solution and are thoroughly washed, first in a neutralizing solution and then in pure water. At this point, the crystals are taken out of the racks and after their frequencies have been checked, are issued to the hand finishing operators who make the final individual adjustment of frequencies. The operators are seated at tables and are busily engaged in one of the most delicate of all operations in the manufacture of crystal oscillators. The final adjustment of frequency of the crystals is done with such great precision that the operators have been aptly named the millionth of an inch girls. Each finishing position is equipped with a small sink, hot running water, compressed air, small dishes containing etching and neutralizing solutions, plastic tongs to hold the crystals, a revolving drum-like edging device, and a comparison oscillator. The crystal is first thoroughly scrubbed with a brush and soap solution. A thoroughly clean surface is necessary if the etching is to take place uniformly. After the scrubbing, it is well rinsed in water. It is thoroughly dried with compressed air and placed between electrodes. The crystal is then measured in the oscillator to determine the amount of frequency that must be etched off to reach the precise desired value. The activity of the crystal is also checked. In the instance seen, the crystal activity is found to be low. To increase the activity, the operator lightly laps the edges of the crystal by holding it within the abrasive-lined rotating drum. The crystal is now gripped in the plastic tongs and is placed in the etching solution for the required time. While the crystal is etching, the operator cleans and dries the electrodes. The etching solution dissolves quartz from the surface of the crystal, making it thinner and thereby increasing the frequency. Also, by removing the damaged surface layer produced by machine lapping, Etching increases the stability of the finished oscillator plate. The crystal is removed from the etching solution, washed, neutralized, again washed, and its frequency measured to find how close it is to the desired value. The frequency is still found to be low, so that the crystal is again scrubbed, etched, washed, dried, and remeasured. The frequency is now found to be within the tolerances, and the crystal is put into its permanent holder. The frequency and activity are again checked. At this stage, the crystals are all put through a drop test and a vibration test to ensure that they will maintain their performance. Under the production tests, the crystals are first dropped through a zigzag funnel-like contrivance. The wooden cover of the box has been removed to permit this photograph of the operation. The intense vibration found in aircraft or other military vehicles requires that every crystal be securely fastened within the holder and not shift its position or frequency. The crystals are now mounted on a broad horizontal rack where they are mechanically vibrated for half an hour. The intensity of the vibration is seen by the behavior of a glass of water, which has here been placed on the vibrating table. The crystals are now taken to a calibration room where an exact measurement of frequency is made by direct comparison with the standard frequency, using a cathode ray oscilloscope. The rotation of an ellipse in the oscilloscope will indicate the frequency down to 1/1000th of 1%. The accuracy is far beyond that required when the ellipse turns as slowly as shown here. The crystals that pass the oscilloscope test have the covers of their holders tightly screwed down. Frequency identification plates are then attached. When the crystals are calibrated, it is found that a small proportion have, for one reason or another, slightly higher frequencies than are desired. These crystals formerly were sent to salvage and were relapped and finished to the next higher frequency channel. Very recently, a revolutionary new technique has been developed in the Reeves Research Laboratory, by which it is possible to reduce the frequency of a crystal whose frequency has been carried too high. In practice, the amount of decrease in frequency needed to bring the overshot crystal back within tolerance is measured. The crystal is then removed from its holder and placed in a slide which centers it in a powerful beam of X-rays. When the slide is pushed in, a switch automatically turns on the X-ray beam, and similarly, when the slide is removed, the X-rays are turned off. The X-rays lower the frequency of the crystal by altering certain atomic properties of the quartz itself. The amount of frequency change is governed by the length of exposure to the X-ray beam. The operator times the exposure to give the desired change in frequency, and the crystal is then removed from the X-ray unit, placed in its holder, the frequency measured again as a check. The recovered crystals are now added to the stock which did not need the X-ray treatment, and all are ready for their final factory tests. The activity and frequency of each crystal are measured and recorded while it is being subjected to temperatures ranging from -55 to +90 degrees centigrade. Air circulating over dry ice in one part of the box simulates temperatures in the stratosphere. Heating units in another part of the box bring the temperature up to heights much greater than those expected under normal operating conditions. The performance of each crystal is measured every 2 degrees over the temperature range, and a complete record of it is made. Thousands of crystals are tested this way every day, for upon these and other tests depend the certainty and accuracy of radio communication and the lives of American airmen and those of our allies. The record charts of each crystal are checked. Those that pass are okayed and sent on. Any crystal whose chart indicates a failure within the temperature range is rejected. At the completion of the temperature test, a final production test is made to see that the holder is tightly sealed against leakage. The crystals are plugged in groups of 60 into a rack which is enclosed in a glass vacuum chamber covered with wire mesh for protection. The air is pumped out as shown by the changing level of the mercury manometer. A potential difference of more than 1,000 volts is placed across the electrodes. If the holder leaks, an ionization current registers on the dial. By means of a selector switch, the operator can measure each of the 60 crystals in turn. At the completion of the measurements, air is let back into the vacuum chamber. When room pressure is attained, the bell jar is lifted and the crystals removed. The crystals are next turned over to the signal corps inspectors. They first undergo electrical inspection, where the units are tested in standard test sets, which simulate the actual conditions under which they will be used in radio sets. When they pass the electrical tests, they are sent on for mechanical tests. The inspector examines each case, looking for any irregularities. Upon completion of the final signal corps inspection, the crystal units are packed. Each crystal unit is placed in a separate box. Before closing the cover, another inspector checks to be certain that the frequency marked on the box is the same as that marked on the crystal unit. The boxes are then closed. The final signal corps check is made in the shipping room as the cartons are filled and sealed. When a carton has been filled, the emblem of the signal corps is stamped on each seam. The emblem of approval, the emblem under which crystals go to war. The emblem under which crystals go to war.
Seeing as how we have covered both the crystals and sands of Florida, we could not properly conclude this presentation without mentioning the quartz beach of Siesta Key, Florida. While most beach sands around the world consist primarily of crushed shell, coral, or volcanic rock, the unique beaches of Siesta Key are made of over 99% powdered quartz crystal. Having been here myself multiple times, I can verify that under inspection, no 2 grains of sand can be distinguished from each other, being so uniform with little to no debris. This exotic sand is millions of years old and allegedly has its origin around 500 miles away in the Appalachian Mountains. This beach is world famous for a number of interesting reasons. For starters, it is frequently voted the nicest beach in America. Spring breakers are known to flock to this beach en masse, and it maintains a year-round party atmosphere. On a somewhat unrelated note, when scrolling through your social media or flipping through magazines, there's an extremely high chance that you have seen Siesta Key beach sand plastered to the thighs of your favorite models. It is this coveted quartz sand which delivers the picturesque, clinging sand aesthetic. This effect does not occur on shell-based beaches, and women travel from thousands of miles away to exploit it. Regardless, Siesta Key has long been a destination for the spiritually inclined, and today hosts frequent gatherings such as drum circles. I highly recommend this beach for all wishing to relax, purify, and heal. And let us now conclude with an excerpt from Vulcan by Walter R. Cassels. At each stroke, the sparks fly brightly, upward from the glowing mass. Hail the stroke that makes them pass. Fall it heavy, fall it lightly. Now the stubborn strength bends humbly, to the master yielding dumbly. From the metal, purged and glowing, forms of freest grace are flowing. Wield thine hammer well, strong arm, strength to beauty, wedded brings. Glory out of rudest things, facts from mere imaginings. Strike from steel its hidden charm. Little reck the rocks that blow, that makes the living water flow. Little recks man's soul the rod, that scourges it through tears to God.